Alors Wolfgang est aujourd'hui chef évangéliste de Kyriba, mais il est aussi le fondateur et ancien CEO de l'entreprise FireApps, dont on a beaucoup entendu parler, et qui a été racheté au printemps par Kyriba. Il est, disons-le, un expert en risques financiers internationaux, et en particulier en gestion des devises. Et c'est d'ailleurs le sujet de son intervention. Welcome.
Merci. Bonjour tous. Je suis désolé de ne pas parler français, but the beauty is we have technology, and with technology you can understand what I'm saying. So thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, what I would like to talk about today is over the last 35 years, I've lived in many countries, and one thing was always in common: currencies. But there's been an evolution of currencies. And what I would like to talk about today is, where do we think currencies are going? And quite frankly, how will it impact you on a day-to-day basis? So, with that started, I always like to start with history. And what is interesting here, not only that the French franc was still the oldest 1792 currency, but that you actually see an evolution here about the currencies, and if you look at the last few, it's actually been accelerating the change of actual currencies. So what's also interesting here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is the Bank of International Settlement expects that roughly $5 trillion of currencies are traded on a daily basis. Yet, as you can see up there, only $1.7 trillion are actually in circulation. My point will be, as you will go through this, is that the next evolution of electronic currencies is actually already here. So, with this in mind, let's go take another look back in history. Certainly, a major change in most of our lifetimes has been Bretton Woods, actually coming off the gold standard. It's actually been researched that we can never go back on the gold standard. Why is that? There's too much debt, too much currency, and too little gold to support a gold standard. So we got off it anyways. Now, given that we are just about to approach the 30th anniversary of the Berlin Wall, taken as a peaceful thing, an interesting thing did happen during that time period, which is that the Deutschmark and the East German mark actually merged. It was not very well done, and the Minister of Finance lost his job. But again, it was a change in German currency. Now then, we are all familiar what happened with the euro. And as I was thinking about this and coming up here, and seeing that you've already been sitting for about 30, 40 minutes again, I actually thought, in the concept of currency, before we go on where this is going, and in the concept of active liquidity network, I would like all of you, in a minute, to stand up and talk to your neighbors and ask them, have you used actual physical cash today? Then I'd like you all to sit back down, and then I'd like those who actually did raise their hands. So please stand up. Let's have a little active liquidity network here, networking, and ask them the question. I think we have answered it. Thank you very much. The blood is moving. We're all good. Thank you for that. If there's any doubt that we're active and that we're network and that we're communicating, I think that doubt has hopefully just been put to rest. So, here's my question. How many of you have actually used physical cash today? Wow. Are you surprised? I've actually been traveling for the last 3.5 weeks, and I haven't used one piece of cash yet. 3.5 weeks around the world. I was in Stockholm a couple days ago. I've been all over. I never use cash. This beautiful thing called Uber gets me around everywhere. Now, I'm going to propose that Bitcoin and Ethereum are interesting. And they were in the front runnings of what I almost hate to call cryptocurrency. Why do I hate to hear it? Because it has some negative connotations to it. They're the forefront of changing the monetary system. But Gilles said it earlier. He actually said it probably has some side effects that would be rather destructive from a legalistic and monetary system point of view. So when I was asked on one of these shows with Marietta Bartiromo on CNBC what I thought in December of 2017 of Bitcoin and Ethereum, I said, somebody should do their homework. What do I mean? The Securities Exchange Commission can go to the United States Senate and change 2 words in a Senate bill that defines what a financial institution is. If you add to a financial institution that it is a currency issuer, Bitcoin, Ethereum are gone. They have to register as banks, they have to have issuance, they have regulatory environments, it's history. So when people were proposing it's going to go to 200,000, I still have to question why it's at 7,000. The next evolution then came, Libra, Ripple. These are very good ideas. Why are they good ideas? Because they're taking the technology to the next level. But even more importantly, they actually are pushing the governments to finally make a very antiquated system much more efficient and much more effective from a timing and from a pricing point of view. So, let's kind of take a look at this thing. So I'm going to propose to you that we will not have Ripple, that we will not have Libra, that we will certainly not have Bitcoin or Ethereum, but I believe that we will all have electronic currency. Because the second question I could have asked all of you was, how many of you have actually used money today via an electronic fashion? Visa cards, MasterCards, cash cards, whatever they all are. So the idea is that the governments are going to have to step up and actually improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the system. And now the question is, what does that actually mean? Where are we going to go there and how will it work? These governments are issuing, most of them, surprising to me, I called the White House about 6-7 months ago, and I've been talking to various senators in the United States. The White House actually stopped any research on electronic currency. Quite frankly, scares the living daylights out of me. Europe working on an electronic currency. Swiss are working on it. The Venezuelans worked on it. The Russians already tried to issue one. But the ones who may be successful at the end of the day, who do you think that may be? Any thoughts? China. Jill actually earlier said it. He said, watch that system. The regulatory environment is different, which scares us because we know we want to work in certain regulations. Some we don't like, some we like, but it protects investors at the end of the day. What the Chinese are going to do that's very different, they are not going to issue a government currency and just put it into the international market via giving it to other central banks. What they're actually going to do, they go into the 7 largest corporations in China, including Alibaba and Baidu, and give them electronic yuan. And if you think that's something that's going to happen in 2020, you're certainly right, but you may be wrong. It may already happen in November. Yes, they've come out and said, we may issue an e-yuan in November of 2019. Do I think that's going to happen? I think that'll be difficult. It's possible. They may do a trial. They might do a V1. But at the end of the day, they will issue a currency. Now, whatever currency is first, because it'll be cheaper, because it will be more efficient, will likely change the monetary environment and could actually, I propose, become the #1 leading currency. That's interesting given the regulatory environment in China versus, for example, the US or Europe. Europeans are thinking about it, as you well know, about trying to do the same thing. But if the Chinese come out first, it becomes questionable, what is the world currency going to be? When I went through history earlier, these were changes. These were changes in Berlin. These were changes in Europe. These were changes in Bretton Woods that before they happened, very few believed. But think about what this could mean to you. What are the viable currencies? And what's the change for these? At the end of the day, it is our job at Kyriba and your job for the company not to predict the future, as Pericles says, but to be prepared for it. So, how does one prepare for it? It comes back to the basics that we've all believed in. And what Kyriba at the end of the day wants to also deliver to you via the active liquidity network is what you probably all want: confidence. If you have better data, you can make better decisions, and those two things are based on confidence. Confidence that the data is right, that you have it at your fingertips, and that you have it speedily and readily available. So, for that confidence to be had, #1, and you've heard it many times today, data is #1. You have to start with the data, better decisions. Then you want to get insight to that data. Insight to that data includes, how good is that data? Can I trust that data? Before I even analyze what to do with that data, I need to make sure that that is clean, that is clear. How can I make better decisions if I don't trust my data? Then, it's amazing. I've stood in front of groups like this for years. And when I, in 2005 and 2006, talked to people about digitalization, they thought I was from the moon. So instead of this, they probably had a little antenna on my head or something. Automation, digitalization, is that the word? I was in Germany in May, and they talked about Digitalisierung. That is it. Well, that's right. Here we are. Because at the end of the day, when we have an e-currency, none of us have 2 days to settle dollar versus euro anymore. It's instantaneous. So no matter how many people you try to help settle, you'll never get it as quick. So automation might have been a nice to have, might have been a vitamin. Automation today is a painkiller. It is what you need when you have pain. And that's why you need the automation. With that automation comes agility. We talked about APIs earlier. I always find those interesting because API is the newest term for program interfaces, ones we've had for many years. But we're going to continue to evolve, and Kyriba is investing heavily into including, we haven't even talked about microservices and who needs what data when, and can't AI tell you when you need that data, where you need that data. But then when you think about all that, what does it mean? At the end of the day, it's something that we all strive for, is to help the company, your company, either optimize their revenues, optimize their gross margins, impact their EBITDA, and their earnings per share. So when we take that back to currency risk management for a minute, sorry, I'm going to go back to this for 1 second. When we go back to currency risk management, it's an established practice in the United States, for example, and in many countries around the world, companies around the world that I've seen, that translation risk, meaning the monetary assets and liabilities from the balance sheet going onto your earnings, net earnings, for a publicly traded company should never be 1 cent earnings per share. That impact should not exist. That benchmark exists today, and we still to this day research about what companies do on average. We're about to come out with the latest quarterly report about the losses that corporations still have. Our job is to provide the technology to get you to the levels that your shareholders are comfortable with. So if it is on the earnings per share, coming from the balance sheet, and I say that in quotation mark because it means different things in different countries, I am referring to it without net investment. You shouldn't have 1 cent earnings per share. If any of you do impact, automation can take that away. Data, insight, agility, and automation. So we at Kyriba are dedicated and very happy to have joined from Fire Apps to Kyriba to really go through this active liquidity network process. Now, one of the questions that when I talk about this often I get is, well, if things go quicker and they're more efficient and they're less costly, what's going to happen to volatility? Is it going to go lower? Is it going to go higher? At the end of the day, while the automation is there, we still are going to value one currency versus the other. As I mentioned earlier in here, electronic currency is just a representation of the existing currency and will be pegged accordingly. That means the difference in value between an E1 and a won, or an E-dollar and a US dollar, or an E-euro versus a euro is zero. Therefore, an E-euro versus an E-won will have at least equal volatility. I actually believe, typically, that when things go faster, volatility actually does not decrease but increases. Now, let's talk about what that means. We had a couple points already. One, active liquidity network with eCurrencies, which I hope you're getting a good grasp about what we feel at Kyriba and what we have to be involved in to help you and be at the forefront of that, is it's going to be instantaneous. It's going to be real time. You heard it a few times. But if nothing else, eCurrencies are going to push instantaneous actions. This, at the end, really accelerates foreign exchange exposure management, risk management, however you want to. We're not here to tell you you should be 1 cent earnings per share. But we're here to tell you that's the benchmark, and that's what companies want to do, and if you want to do it, you can do it. And you can do it through automation. This becomes very difficult to manage without it. And the reason that Kyriba bought Fire Apps at the very core is, and this is a mind change, when you think about cash flow forecasting, you think about forecasting in individual currencies. You think about how many euros will I have, how many yen will I owe, etc., etc. The difference is, and it's an educational process, is that when you want to manage the risk, you actually don't just manage euro in a closed system. You have to create a relationship to another currency. That currency relationship, whether that's an economic one or an accounting one, building one currency versus another, overlays that cash flow forecasting and becomes an exposure forecasting. And it comes at the very heart at one currency versus another and being able to do that instantaneously. And the future is going to be, and we're working hard on this future, that the management of cash and exposure will merge, where you're not selling euros and looking at because you needed to buy some dollars, and you'll look at your exposure next day, but when you do it, the risk immediately is adjusted accordingly. So that is one of the key differentiators we just talked about, forecasting we talked about. You will not find another company who's done this. And I challenge that one. I know lots of people have done and tried, but we actually, the overlay and the instantaneous managing of cash and creating a currency pair out of that has not been done before. And that is what is, at the end, what we're trying to do at, and we have a long track record for doing that. So for that, merci beaucoup. Et I give it back to Caesar.
Merci very much.
Thank you. Thank you.